What's going on, everyone? Happy Kalima Shakti Day. Welcome back to the journey to the Dial of the Destiny, the look and retrospective of the whole entire Indiana Jones franchise leading up to the newest movie coming out this year. I hope you guys enjoyed my Raiders of the Lost Ark review with Chris from Movies and Munchies. It was a lot of fun. We went deep, very deep into the annals of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was, it's quite an interesting look into the process of what Raiders is and how important it is to the idea of cinema and movies. Today, we're of course getting into the second film in the franchise, the second of 5 films. This is a film that was very divisive, and as we'll talk, was the creation of the PG-13 rating after this movie came out. But we'll get into like the details of all that. But I, as always, these are on my Movie Emporium channel. But I have somebody you probably recognize joining us today. Somebody who loves his Kalimas and loves his Thuggy Clans, and also loves the Fifth Dimension, a Twilight Zone podcast, and of course that human being, that person from Bangkok Palace is of course Jacob from Jacob Anders Reviews. How you doing, Jacob? How's life? I talk to you every day, so I'm assuming it's good, but the people don't know. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. If you drink the blood, you will not come back.
So at some point you're gonna pull out the doll and start pointing it, right?
Oh man, I should have had a doll.
Pin.
Don't have any dolls around.
Man, the 80s were crazy because they were like, they were picking people with the doll and like creep show and stuff like that. They were just like burning them. It's like, what the hell is going on? And I found out a lot of cocaine was being used in the 80s, so I guess that makes a lot of sense. But
I think a lot of cocaine was being used while they wrote this movie too.
Yeah. I was telling Triv. Triv sent a video for this new movie called Cocaine Crab. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Seen Cocaine Shark.
Trailer. Well, yeah, Cocaine Shark is coming out too. But there's a movie called Cocaine Crab coming out, and I'm pretty sure these guys were on cocaine crabs when they made this movie. So it's this movie's something. I mean, this movie's gained popularity over the years, but Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom is of course a prequel. Came out in 1984 during Memorial Day weekend, because kids in Memorial Day weekend and ripping out hearts is the perfect example of Memorial Day.
Sure.
We celebrate the heart ripping out of people as they burn on the I don't know, this movie's crazy. To start out, as I do with the Twilight Zone thing, I know you've seen this. It's been a while since you've seen this, so you've seen it recently, but you said you saw this. Did you see this in the theater, or did you see one of the reissues?
No, I saw it when it first came out in theaters when I was a kid.
You?
And I've definitely seen this Indiana Jones movie more than any of the other ones. I like them all. Well, most of them. But this one was kind of a staple when I was a kid. It was always on HBO or whatever. And so it was on all the time. I think we had a VHS of it, probably a VHS recording of the TV version or something like that. But yeah, I've seen Temple of Doom a ton of times. Now, I haven't, up until, of course, watching it for this review, I haven't seen it for quite a while. I think I watched them all, I say a few years back now, but it was whenever it first came out on DVD. So I watched them all then, but I don't think I've watched it since then. So it's been a while. So it was a nice little revisit to Kali Ma times. And I really enjoy, well, we'll talk about it, but I really enjoyed the most fun part of this movie for me was all the ADR, insane stuff. There's like a ridiculous amount. There's ADR in every movie, but the re-recorded audio in this movie and some of the voiceovers and just the sound effects, I think is great in this movie.
Yeah, and then like the back screen, when they do like they have the main character, and then they have like the green screen stuff in the back, and how like they have to like crop it out, and on top of that, like what we'll talk about is probably one of the great action sequences in the franchise is the mine cart, and you can actually see the little dolls moving back and forth and stuff like that. It's fucking fantastic, man.
Yeah, I thought that stuff was. I did not know until I watched Corridor Crew video a few months back. I never of course I knew some of it was miniature, but some of that stuff I didn't even realize was miniatures and little dolls. And this time, of course, I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, there's one. It is so well done and seamlessly done that some of it you could tell is blue screen and you can tell is miniatures, like with the water and everything. But like a lot of the stuff with the characters in there, I did not realize I didn't realize it was miniatures. It still looks really damn good. because it's real.
Yeah, there's a behind the scenes on it. I think either ILM doc that they did on Disney Plus or something like that, where it actually shows how they did it, and it's like the world's biggest erector set. Like it's huge. Like the like they literally had pieces that they could take apart, and then they can put the camera in to film from certain angles. But it's great. But we'll get into that scene here in a bit. This was not actually a movie that was written by Lawrence Kasdan or Philip Kaufman or anybody. Do you know who wrote this movie outside
No,
George Lucas?
I don't
It was the
know. I don't.
writers of American Graffiti and Howard the Duck, William Hewitt and
See it.
Gloria Katz. So it makes a lot of sense that this movie wasn't well received because, of course, Howard the Duck wasn't a very well received movie.
I love that one. That's another one from my childhood. I always loved. I acknowledge, not a very good movie. Hadn't seen it in a while, but
Yeah,
there's lots of movies we watched when we were kids that we loved that, were awesome back then. And maybe that's where they need to stay.
right. This movie is interesting because it has a lot of things that get set up in this movie that pay off in other movies with certain things that happen. But the interesting thing is the fact of not only is this movie anticipated from the simple fact of how well Raiders did, but the fact that Indiana Spielberg and George Lucas agreed that should have been the follow up to Raiders of the Lost Ark, not the simple fact of the violence, is just how simply dark this movie is in the sense of like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes, it has moments of like people's face meltings and stuff like that,
Yep.
but it almost seems like they ramped up the violence because once again, maybe they were on cocaine, maybe they were on some kind of psychedelic drug where they're like, you know what kids like? Ripping out of hearts and burning of victims and child labor and child slavery. I mean, and eating monkey brains. It's just I gotta ask you this question to start out. Like, what the hell were they thinking? I mean, we like it. We've grown to kind of like this movie for what it's worth. But I mean, can you imagine? Like you said, you went to see this movie as a kid, walking into this movie going, "I'm getting ready to see another." This is like when Empire Strikes Back came out, and you go and you watch it, and at the time people were like, "What the hell is this? This is scarier than my fucking kid. My kid's crying on the corner here. What the hell is going on?" Like, how do you look at that? Like, I mean, I don't know, as somebody who's a father of many kids, like, do you let them watch something like this at an early age, or do you just go, no, I'm going to wait till they turn like 35 to watch it? I mean, I'm joking, but how do you see this as somebody who was a kid watching this compared to now when you see kind of how disturbed this movie can get? Like, it's actually pretty great, but it's just, yeah.
I don't think it's like ridiculously more violent than the first one. Because like the first one's got like the guy getting pushed into a propeller and like the iconic face melting scene and things like that. I think there's a little bit more violence. It's a little bit more spread out through this one. This one's a bit more gross, like with the bugs and all that stuff and like the whole eating scene, the iconic monkey brains and all that, which necessarily isn't violent, but I think all that stuff added together just kind of gives the movie an air of being more graphic. When it's not, it's just kind of more gross in some ways, but it does still retain kind of that, 1930s serial kind of feel that Lucas was going for when he put this stuff together, like the adventure aesthetic, kind of a goofy feel to it to a degree. Would I let my kids watch this? Yeah. But I mean, I recognize that a lot of people wouldn't let their kids watch stuff I would let my kids watch.
Right.
I'm more about like teaching them less censorship. Some things I will, but I mean, less censorship and more, educating on like what's okay and what's not, what's real, what's not. That's a different video unto itself. But I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't, and maybe it's because I grew up with it, and the 80s was a different time, man. Like it was a very different time as far as what they would show in like certain ratings of movies. I guess maybe I just don't see it as violent or like that ridiculously violent. Sure,
Right.
the ripping out of the heart, and it might be because like. Yes, there's the ripping. Everybody goes straight to the heart ripping scene because that is pretty like, oh my God, they just ripped a guy's heart out. But it's done so kind of like almost like a comic book. It's like it's so over the top that it's like he just reaches in a guy's chest, it rips his heart out, it bursts into flames. The guy's still alive, and he's just like, oh, my heart. and he gets lowered into like a fucking volcano. It's kind of like I think it's so over the top that it kind of doesn't it pads the violence a little bit. It makes it not seem as bad because it is just so kind of cartoonish to a degree and over the top. So maybe it's just that I grew up with it. If I had never seen this movie and watched it, I might be like, "Oh my god, clutch my pearls." But for me, no, I don't really think it's that bad.
Right. It's I think
It
it's
was
just the simple fact that
this and Gremlins, right? That prompted
yeah,
the
I think
whole
Gremlins came out the same year
PG-13.
as this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
and
Gremlin. Let
Gremlins
me double
prompted the
check.
PG-13.
Well, no,
Both
it
of
was
which have Steven Spielberg attached to them. Just saying.
actually it wasn't Gremlins. It was wasn't it Red Dawn, or was Red Dawn the first movie to
Red
get
Dawn was the
PG-13?
first PG-13 movie,
Oh,
but that
okay.
prompted them to like say, "Hey, we need something else in between PG and R." I want to
Uh,
say it was this and Gremlins. And there's probably some other things, but I
oh,
think
you're probably right. Yeah, yeah.
I know
It's
definitely this one, but I want to say I've heard Gremlins is cited as being one of them too.
so what we've come to the conclusion of is Steven Spielberg is the creator of our nightmares, of our of the things we had nightmares about as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Gremlins, running around a muck, destroying a small town, hearts getting being ripped out, faces
Twilight Zone
melting.
movie, The Girl with No Mouth,
Yeah, Twilight
which he was a
Zone.
producer on. Show Dante,
Right.
Gremlins.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. It's just, it's so,
I also different. I
yeah.
mean, same movie, slightly different subject. I can admit I didn't realize this was a prequel until I was in my 20s.
I don't. Yeah, no. Unless you were like, yeah, unless you were following the logistics or time frame of Indiana Jones. The only way you know that it's a prequel is the time frame, like the time, the
The
date
very
that comes
beginning,
up
yeah.
on the screen. Yeah. So,
I mean, what year
but
did this
it
came out in 86?
84.
84, yeah,
84.
84.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
would have been like 5 when I saw this, which I don't know. Some people probably like your parents let you watch this at 5, but whatever. It was PG. Um,
I mean, my parents took me to see White Man Can't Jump when I was like 8 years old. So I mean, yeah, I think Temple of Doom was just fine for it. Once
absolutely.
again, parents didn't give a crap. They needed to take
No.
their kids to see something, and Black Cauldron was the only thing available, or
My sisters took
Ghostbusters,
me to
or
see White Men Can't Jump.
oh
Anyway,
yeah,
yeah, I don't was it? Oh yeah, I just didn't. I guess at that point, I didn't I didn't connect the dots as 1935 and all that, and I went through most of my childhood just not really realizing that this happened before. It came out after, and at that point, prequels was kind of like not a. I'm not gonna say it's not a thing, but it just wasn't a very well known thing. So
yeah,
if a
it's not
movie
very
came out
common,
after another one, you assumed timeline wise
right?
it happened afterwards. I just always assumed it happened afterwards. And I think it probably would have been around like the late 90s, early 2000s when I realized, oh my God, this happened before Raiders.
It's funny because when you kind of sit there and look at it, there are things in the movie that point to it being a prequel, just on a gag level and a meta level when it comes to like what Indy does in the future movies or the past movie.
Sure.
I mean, we can talk about it. There's things in this movie where, for instance, like the plane sequence when he's flying, he's like, I don't know how to fly a plane. And then you look at Last Crusade and he's like, I've flown a plane before, I don't know how to land. Well, I think, yeah, he flew a plane, but he never landed the plane. He crashed and then jumped out in a fucking, or excuse me, jumped out in a raft and stuff like that.
He learns from his
And
mistakes.
yeah,
In Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, he should have landed a plane, but yeah, I don't know, not known how to stop it. I don't.
right,
He could have
right,
had like this whole plane arc over all the Indiana Jones movies.
right. He got the wheels down, but he just couldn't land it. He got it down to the ground and he just dropped it. He's like, hey, psh,
Come back around and
stop.
Dial of Destiny, he's going to need to take off in a plane. He's going to be like, I've flown a plane, I've landed a plane, I've stopped a plane. I do not know how to take off in a plane.
He's like, you get it up there, I can fly it just fine.
Yeah.
He has like 2 people that work with him. He's like, one fly, one takes off, one lands, and and then the last movie is just he learned how to fly, but then he crashed into a golf course.
Yeah.
So yeah.
like
The other thing, a couple other things, for instance, like the whole 2 thuggy soldiers with the big swords, and he's like reaching for his gun. What's great is I think he lost the gun like in the plane or something like that a while ago. But this is something that you said you recognize that I didn't. That it's either a coincidence or is a direct reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark, where a soldier or some sort literally looks like the thuggy from Raiders of the Lost Ark is like swinging his sword around, And Indiana Jones like, I'm done. I can't do. I'm not doing this. And he just shoots him. So I'm like, the idea that they can go back and they can reference stuff and they can take stuff like that and throw it into the movie and kind of either you're going to remember it or you're not is actually pretty impressive because this is 3 years after the first movie came out. So I don't know.
Well,
I thought that was
also
great.
I know the first time around in the first film, you're probably aware that he was supposed to fight that guy, but he had like
Yeah.
the flu and he was really sick. So
Yeah.
instead of like, because he was like really down, so instead of having him like do this big labor intensive action scene, he just pulled his gun out and shot him. And it totally
Right.
worked. It's one of the most memorable moments. And in this one, you know, as a kid, I did recognize that. I was like, that's like in the last movie. But I was thinking it happened after. Like he was like, oh, I'll do it
Yeah.
like last time. Oh shit. Now I take like, you know, years later, I recognize, oh, that's what he tried to do the first time. And maybe the second time he was like, never lose my gun.
Yep. Yep.
All
And
takes on new meaning.
Oh man, it's so good. But the movie was highly anticipated. Like I said, you don't release something on Memorial Day unless you're an idiot or you're anticipating that this movie's gonna be successful. And I think like Empire Strikes Back and like some other films like sequels that are successful, I don't think people were prepared for what they were getting themselves into with this film.
Mhm.
And I don't think the studio, I mean, there's nothing about it, but I don't think the studios really were anticipating that this movie was going to go as dark as it was. But because the last movie had been so successful and they trusted Spielberg and they trust Lucas because they're very popular, well respected directors and writers at this point, that they're going, oh yeah, Indiana Jones, let's just release it, it'll make some money. And as we see, the movie made money, but it didn't make, I think it made half the amount that the first movie made, and it actually damages the franchise a little bit because of the simple fact of how dark and disturbing and what it was doing and how it traumatized kids. And it's a movie where it's about, like we said, or like I said, child labor, child slavery, and people with ripping out hearts and stuff like that. I don't know, I found that pretty fascinating that they can release something like that in Memorial Day, and now they're releasing stuff like Little Mermaid. And I feel this movie at least attempted to be somewhat unique and original, and Little Mermaid it was a remake, so I don't
Just
know.
goes to show you that as time went on, they just released more and more terrifying things on Memorial Day, apparently.
Right. The next movie was Poltergeist, or not Poltergeist, but it was Showgirls. Oh, they released that on Memorial Day, didn't they?
Little Mermaid is still the most terrifying thing so far.
Oh
Mr.
man,
Showgirls was on Memorial Day, really?
no. That'd be hilarious if they did release that Memorial Day. They released that About My Father on Memorial Day, which was interesting. But anyway, so to talk about this movie is set in I forget what date. It's set is it like a decade or so before the first movie or something?
It's 1935. I know the first one took place early
It's like a
40s.
few years before.
I don't remember the date of the first one.
Oh, it takes place a year before. Damn, he dumped Willie Scott pretty quickly in this movie.
Yeah, and Short Round.
Between the
It's only a year before. I thought it took place later than that.
Yeah, Raiders took place in 36.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was later on.
Yeah. So in essence, this movie starts out with one of those dance sequences that you saw in like the old school golden age Hollywood like musicals with, we're introduced to Willie Scott, played by Spielberg's wife, Kate Capshaw, or will be future wife, Kate. Yeah, soon to be. This is where they met. I gotta ask your feelings on her before we continue. She was really annoying when you first watched her in her role of this movie. People really hated her. She's like the Jar Jar Binks of this franchise. But if you really think about her character and what I think Lucas was doing, I think it's a commentary on how annoying Hollywood people can be when they're put in situations that make them uncomfortable. Like, I'm not saying this is a extreme version of that situation, but you always hear stories about, how an actor or an actress gets put in a situation that we would think is normal, and they freak out and they have like, panic attacks and all this nonsense. And I think that's what they were trying to do here, is have this woman was a huge celebrity for this world that she inhabits, and she's doing music for this. And I think they're in China or Korea. They're in
Saigon.
Beijing. Oh, Saigon. Yeah, Saigon. and she gets thrust into a situation where she has to, see monkey brains and have to deal with a thuggy call and deal with bugs and stuff like that. Wouldn't you be in that same predicament if you're that successful as an actress and you're in this world that wouldn't you be just as annoying? Am I wrong? I mean, what do you think about her character?
I can't say that when like I thought and I've heard for years, like when it first came out and for years afterwards, she was the biggest sticking point of this movie. And you talk about the violence and all that. Sure that came up, but what I remember as a kid is everybody hated Willie and how all she did the whole time was scream and yell.
Right.
And she does scream and yell a lot.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
even going into it this time, I was like, all right, here's the one where she screams and yells the whole fucking time. I mean, after a rewatch with a more critical eye, it's there. I don't think it's as bad as I remember it being based on what everybody was saying back then. She is a little annoying at times, but it's kind of just she's playing that kind of damsel in distress, annoying, socialite character, highfalutin, pretty prissy woman or whatever. Like what you said, whether it's a commentary on like Hollywood or not, I don't know. But she is definitely playing that character stereotype of like the rich socialite who gets thrust into this nasty, dirty world and is being made to do these things. And she's just screaming and yelling the whole time. But for the most part, I had memories of it being really annoying. It's not really that bad. I mean, it fits. She's not the deepest character in the world. And you kind of do wonder why the hell Indiana Jones, that character, would want to be around this person. Because they do kind of have like this love hate dynamic for most of the movie.
Yeah.
And then just suddenly now they don't. And I think I don't really think Indiana Jones likes her. I think he just thinks she's hot and he wants to get laid.
Well, that's the funny part. Like you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, you watch that opening scene in the campus, and all the college girls are like swinging over him. So you can only imagine how much sex this guy's having, on top of having like the most overpaid or most overpaid teacher that he is, because he's always gone, and how much the substitute teachers are making off of him. Plus he's banging on like these hot chicks and stuff like that. It's just like you gotta laugh, because the movie's about an archaeologist that travels around the world fighting bad guys, and the substitute teacher gets a call like every 5 days, like, can you come in and teach for like 3 weeks because our guy's out again? And he's like, man, it's pretty funny if you think about it.
Seems like a character. He does not seem like his character would be interested in someone so superficial as her. And I just really, because he doesn't really show any interest in her whatsoever until they get there in their rooms, and he's like, all right, I got my stomach full. Time to go to bed. Got a hottie over here. Let's make this happen. And like then in the end, all of a sudden he's like, whipping her and bringing her over there, and they have their little kiss. But so it doesn't really surprise me that much that she does not show up in Raiders, because they probably only lasted like a week after that.
As soon as they got the deli, they were like, yeah, I think we're done.
He's like, oh my god,
off and married the director.
Fuck up.
Can you imagine like her in bed? Oh, Indy, it was so terrifying.
Indy,
like, yeah, man. But
I mean, it might be great.
I mean, maybe she's great. I don't know, but yeah,
I don't hold it against Kate Capshaw herself.
No,
because she's paid you a role or written to act that way. I don't feel like she came in and said, "Okay, this is what the character should do." I think she was doing what she was doing the job she was hired to do. But man, yeah, there are times that it's just kind of like her character is just there to scream.
Yeah, she kind of damsel in distress.
Yeah, and there's other times though that you kind of like it. She's that character you don't hate, but she's kind of annoying, but like in somewhat of an endearing way. But I think maybe they took it a little bit far, and I think it grated on some people's nerves a little bit more than mine. But
right, I mean, yeah, you see it like in this first part, which is kind of like a prequel, not a prequel, but like, was it not an epilogue? But what is the thing? A prologue. This is like a prologue where we're introduced to Willie Scott. She's doing her thing as an actress and singer, and basically
world-renowned, famous
what's that?
American vocalist, as Dan Aykroyd says.
right, in that weird whatever, I don't know what accents he's doing, but it's
Yeah.
so weird. It feels like Spielberg saw him during Twilight Zone. He's like, you want to come do a small part in Temple of Doom? He's like, sure, can I sell my vodka while I'm there? He's like, yeah, sure, why not?
Can I do a weird
But
ass accent?
right. but like this whole scene I think is probably one of the better parts of the movie, where he's there to do a trade-off on some kind of artifact that he's found for Lao Chang, I think is his name. Lao
Next
Che,
time. Wow.
who's played by the actor Roy Chao, who of course is the he is the mentor to Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport. I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
if you
he
remember
is.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
he was
He's a
familiar.
famous he's a famous actor, or a famous Asian actor.
Yeah.
But he plays a crime boss who wants this thing that Indiana Jones has found, and they're gonna give him diamonds. But what I think is great is it plays out like a really cool kind of suspenseful moment. And then this kind of shows you how they do this thing in prequels or original films, where they show the main protagonist, like if it's an action star, how wet behind the ears he is. Maybe this is like one of his early missions or something like that, and he doesn't they do this thing where they kind of homage it back to the date sequence in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's constantly drinking, he's trying to drink the drink, and he keeps not doing it, but then he drinks it and it's poisoned, which I think is great because it leads into a great action sequence with where basically he's trying to get the antidote. He skewers somebody with like a fire skewer, which is great.
On a sword.
And
Yeah.
oh yeah, it was a sword. I thought it was a fire skewer or something like
It
that.
was
But it's
it
like
was a skewer, but well, maybe it wasn't. So it looked like a sword that was
uh,
used as a skewer that was on fire, and then he
right.
like threw it at the guy. I was like, "That's wow. How much was that dish?" Also, just to back up for just a second,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I remember the opening scene with the song and dance and all that, but as
Uh,
paying attention to it today, there's a part in that everything's cool. She comes out, she's doing her little anything goes and all that. And then she runs off inside this dragon mouth that you assume is like some, fiberglass paper mache dragon on this wall in this little bar or a restaurant. She runs into this thing, and all of a sudden they're in like a whole new world with like
all the dancers and
50
stuff.
dancers, this big huge hall and all that's inside this smoke-filled dragon's mouth. And I never really put two and two together when I was younger, but now I'm looking at it and I'm like, what? Nobody's in, they're all in the other room. Nobody's watching you in here. Where is this room? Because one assumes that on the other side of that wall is nothing. She just runs off
Right.
into this big huge room. I don't know. I guess it kind of works.
I mean that's the thing about 40s and 50s musicals. I mean, you remember Blazing Saddles when they did the men's chorus thing with Dom DeLuise, and they do those sequences where it's like they'll be in a small set, like Singing in the Rain or something like that. They'll be on a small set, and it'll just expand to this like extravagant gala of just like dancing, kicking ladies and all this stuff. And it just, I think that's what it's an homage to. But yeah, you're like, all right. It's like, man, if this is what's being like in a Dragon's like, man, sure, a bunch of dancing ladies. Maybe this one of them's looking for a guy. I mean, it's just like it's funny to watch, but I mean, it's just the whole idea of like the absurdity of like the spectacle and
yeah, well, it is the first in many things in this movie that just kind of don't make sense, but
yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but it moves at such a brisk clip, and it's well filmed, well done because of Spielberg, I assume, because he does this a lot in his movies. Not a lot, but he has a history of doing shit that just doesn't make sense, but he films it in such a way that you just kind of roll with it, like the whole goat T-Rex thing in Jurassic Park. He knew about that, like the whole thing when people were like, somebody came up and was like, "Hey, by the way, this doesn't make sense, but this goat's right here. You shouldn't be able to see him. He should be way down there." And he's like, "Just roll with it."
Yeah, just go with it. Well,
it works.
Just
in
trust
the
me.
moment, and it'll be okay. People aren't going to be thinking about that. They're going to be thinking about how awesome this is right now. And a lot of that happens in this movie, and we'll touch on it. Shit happens, and if you really stop and think about it, you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But his filmmaking is so it moves at such a brisk clip and is so snappy and just well done you don't really think about it unless you stop and think about it like I did, because I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
weirdo that does that. Because a lot of these things I just really didn't think about for decades at this point, and now and it works. I mean, it works. He doesn't
Yeah.
like, you get stuck on too many of those little details. So I mean, hey, I can't fault the guy there. It does work. But man, this one over all the other ones, or at least the other two in the OG trilogy, this one has the most what the fuck moments. If you sit down and think about it, out of all of them, or out of the three.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of like the prologue to this movie is you have the singer, you have Indiana Jones making a deal with some gangsters. It goes terribly wrong for Indiana Jones, who makes the biggest mistake of drinking and trusting these gangsters who are going to screw him over. He goes on a car chase sequence with the gangsters and does it. I know he's in a hurry to get out of the city, but he doesn't make the connection of this plane, which I know the door is open, but this guy is a crime lord who has connections all over the city, and he doesn't take the time to go, maybe my stupidity is going to be the fault of us ended up in India or whatever, or wherever they end up in. And I just think it's funny, it's great, but like you said, you start thinking about it, you're like, did Indy just not think this through? Like, is he just going in this with his dick out or something like that? It's just like, what is he doing? It just doesn't. It shows you like the wet behind the ears problematic situation that he finds himself in as being a prequel. So he has to learn his lessons like Spider-Man or something. I don't know.
This is the first one, I think, out of the four that we have so far, apart from Dial. I haven't seen, that one's not out yet.
Yeah.
This is the first one that he gets into. He kind of falls into the situation. Like he doesn't go like all the other ones. He sets out on an adventure. Raiders, he sets out after the Ark, and even in the Crystal Skull, he sets out for, I can't remember whatever he's setting out there, but I think he's going after Marion or Marion's dad or something. Whatever.
Yeah.
He goes with a
yeah.
purpose after these things.
Mhm.
This is the first and only one so far that he just kind of literally falls into the situation, and then kind of like, just picks it up from there. He didn't like leave his university or wherever he's at to go searching for these stones. I thought that's interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, he's just trying to get back to New Delhi so he can go back to. He even says, "I just need to get back to New Delhi to go back to my school."
Yeah,
but I don't know if this makes you laugh at all. But now that Everything Everywhere All at Once comes out, we're of course introduced to Short Round, who becomes like the companion to Indiana Jones, which they need. I don't know why they never brought this character back for the subsequent movies, because Kay Kwan's like fantastic in this movie. But I find it funny that of all the actors in this movie, the one person who has an Oscar is not Harrison Ford. It's actually Quan now, who won for. So Short Round has an Oscar. It's a funny. I mean, I know it took like 40 years or whatever, but it's the funniest thing ever. Where Harrison Ford, Quan got his first nomination. Harrison Ford got one nomination, has never won. It's just, I find that
that's
funny.
right. He hasn't never won one, has he?
No, he got Witness was his only nomination, but
the reason he's not in, that he never showed up in the other movies, I would think, and this is just, there's nothing behind this besides my own speculation. The first movie obviously takes place after this one, but happened already. So they can't go back and, I mean, George Lucas does retroactively go back and add things. So we might get a CGI Short Round. But anyway, you can't be in that one. Not Raiders. What's the third one?
Last Crusade.
Last Crusade. Brain fart. The Last Crusade, his sidekick, if you will, is more his dad. So throwing Short Round in there would probably throw that balance off some. And then, Crystal Skull was a long time later, and his son, Shia LaBeouf. That was his son in the movie. You got him, and then maybe Quan will show up in the new one. I doubt it.
That would be cool. I mean, I know John Rhys Davies shows up for like 5 minutes in the movie from what I hear, so I know he's in it. So at least they brought John Rhys Davies back.
If he showed up in this new one, we would have already heard about it. I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. Or they told him not to say anything. But I mean, what do you like? The great lines that come through this movie are not from Indiana Jones or not from the bad guys or Kate Capshaw. They come from Kate Quan. Yeah, hold on to your potatoes. It's like it's like, you cheat, Dr. Jones. It's like I think casting Quan, who eventually went on to
Crazy.
do the Goonies, it's so funny because he's like a young kid. Spielberg works with kids very well in his movies, and it's just funny because Kwan's one of those people that doesn't, his English is not great, so it fits perfectly into his world of like you get this like son father relationship that it makes you wonder what happens to Short Round after this movie. Does he like go into
Right?
the system like
DHS
in America?
take him. They said, "Good God,
Yeah.
you're taking this kid on these adventures with people ripping out hearts. This is not okay, Dr. Jones."
Right? Taking him to India and
Never bats eye about it. Never is he
no,
like, "Oh man, I
nothing.
can't. I'm sorry I got you involved in this," or we got to get this kid out of here. No, he's like, "Hey, come here and help me with this dangerous
Yeah.
shit."
Yeah, drive this car or stop the brakes or
Yeah.
stop a revolt or start a revolt in the child slavery racket. And, he saves India a couple times in this movie actually when Indy gets turned in like the weirdest way possible and a couple other points. But I mean, it's a character that you kind of have. It's like a lot of these Indiana Jones movies, or just Indiana Jones in general. A lot of these characters you kind of have to suspend disbelief on because it wouldn't make any sense. You like the fact that this young kid is basically his second in command for Indiana Jones, and I don't know. It's
This
kind of
is a
great.
weird one though. There's all these characters, especially being a prequel. I guess that's part of the issue with it is like because they brought back other characters from the other movies in later movies. This one, all these characters just never show up again,
Yeah,
or we never
especially in
even
this.
get mention of them.
Well, this movie was actually supposed to be a completely different movie. It was actually supposed to be a sequel. And I think if I read right, it was supposed to bring back Karen Allen, but I think that it was supposed to bring back Lawrence Kasdan as a screenwriter. But I think because of the story that was pitched by George Lucas and eventually turned into a prequel, I think they threw everything out. And then this movie getting the reception that it did and making half the profit that the original movie made, I think they just wanted to wipe their slate clean and just go, you know what? We're going to bring back Sala. We're going to bring back Denholm Elliott. And we're going to go back into the Nazism. And we're just going to that's it.
It did well, even on the how much it made, making less. It was still the highest grossing film of 1984, apparently.
Was it really?
Yeah, worldwide. Worldwide, it was third in North America after Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters.
Well, still, I mean, I guess I get that because of just the fact that it's Indiana Jones. I think wasn't this you said the same year as Beverly Hills Cop?
Yeah, Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters. In North America, those were higher than it, but worldwide, it was the highest.
Can you imagine living like every decade has that one year where they have like classic movies that come out and just completely define that decade. Like the 80s had 1982, 1984, 1989 as like the years. Like 1984, like you said, Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters and Gremlins. I mean,
yeah,
Romancing the Stone, The Karate Kid, Star Trek, Search for Spock's not that it's probably that great. Police Academy.
I like this.
I mean, it's crazy. Amadeus came out that year.
Amadeus. Not the Falco song. He's talking about the movie, guys.
No, yeah. Amadeus. Wolfgang, was it Wolfgang Amadeus or something like that? Sing that. Yeah. Dune. Michael David Lynch's Dune.
I like Dune, but I don't think it's really seen as like a triumph among film fans.
No, not at all. But I mean, yeah, that's this type of film. Like this is the year that changed a lot for like the Hollywood system and the MPAA. You just have all this stuff, but this movie just took it to a whole new level when it came to the violence and craziness and creepiness and all that stuff. But it leads to the plane sequence where they're on a cargo plane with a bunch of birds and stuff like that. I feel bad for them birds, knock them birds out so they can at least try to survive. And you have Indies, everybody sleeping, and the two pilots who are Lao Che's, whatever. After the whole Dan Aykroyd stuff, Lao Che's there. His people, they jump out of the plane. So apparently a plane can fly by itself in the 1930s with no autopilot or anything. And Willie Scott wakes up and she's like, "Oh crap. There's no one flying the plane," and it leads to no parachutes. Yeah, no parachutes. And the most, I I think is the most laughable but funniest, but was probably one of the greatest sequences in the franchise. Where you have the sequence in Last Crusade with Indiana Jones getting his book signed by Adolf Hitler, and you have Raiders of the Lost Ark where I don't know where they're you have the bad guy fall in the snow because he touched the medallion, and Kingdom of Crystal Skull with the swinging vines.
Monkeys.
Yeah, the monkey swinging vines thing. But I don't think anything tops this sequence, and I don't know how you feel about it. Let's just say that you were thousands of feet in the air, or a good amount of feet in the air, and the only thing you had to survive is a life raft that somehow floats with very heavy people on it. Can we talk about this? Can we break this down? Like,
Yeah,
what do
we
you think
can.
about this?
All right, so when they jump out of the plane on a life raft, okay, we're gonna look past the whole thing. It's like it would probably just flip them all over the place and they'd fly out.
Yeah,
But
right.
okay, suspension of disbelief. They hit this mountain. It's on a slope, so I'm like, okay,
Yep.
it'd be a rough landing, but all right, I'm down. This is an Indiana Jones movie. It's over the top. I'm cool with that. The part where I was like, come on now, is when we're out of the water and they go, oh no, and they get to the bottom of the hill and it's a cliff. All right,
Right.
and they shoot off this cliff, but it's like it's like Niagara Falls. I mean, they like fall forever and then land in the water. Firstly, they're all still in the boat. Secondly,
Yep.
they would be dead. Even as a kid, I was like, there's no, I'm gonna roll with it. I'm along for the ride, I suppose, but I'm taking notice of that. That was a little bit too high. That would have killed the shit out of them. But
Well, like I was saying with Raiders of the
this
Lost Ark, there's
movie
a
is the reason why when I was a kid, I thought you could land in water from pretty much any height and be okay. I didn't realize that no, you hit water from a certain height and it's like concrete. But
like there's a sequence in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where they're driving, they have the boat vehicle, and they crash down like 3 waterfalls or whatever, and they somehow survive, and none of them gets like knocked out of the boat. And then there's a sequence in, like, this is how unrealistic the series can get. There's a sequence in Raiders, and I've talked about this, where they are driving down the road, like this chase sequence, Indy's in the truck, and he knocks one of the vehicles that's like next to him trying to shoot him off to the side. And at no point there is any revelation of a cliff the size of like the Grand Canyon being anywhere near where they're at. And also you see, like in Blues Brothers, you just see this gigantic fall of this vehicle that comes
like
out of
Coons is the
nowhere.
cat.
Yeah.
Like they just take off and
Right. It's insane, but kind of awesome. And the same thing here. It's like, I'm sure I get, if this is what we're gonna see, I'm sure it can't get any worse than this. It's not gonna get any crazier.
not at all.
Yeah. No, not anywhere close to them falling and surviving a 1,000-foot drop or something. But thus Indy is like, though he almost dies many times in this movie, he somehow survives it all. But
and in all honesty, it is ridiculous, and you're just like, that's no way. But it's fun. I'll admit, up to this point in the film and forward, I'm having fun. I'm watching it. You got to just totally suspend all that disbelief, especially with this one. And it's a good time. It's fun. There's nothing that's so bad or so outlandish that it totally takes you out of it. There's been a couple of moments that it's like, but that's a bit okay. Moving on to the next thing. Once again, it's because Spielberg just keeps it just clipping along. And if he does slow down, it's not right after something that was so fucking ridiculous that now I got time to sit here and think about it. He knows how to slow the scene down to get you to a spot where you can breathe.
Right. It's great. But I mean, this is when we come across a they are, where are they at? Let's back up.
They're like they're in India and they meet the little shaman.
Yeah, it's in Mayapur in India. It's a small village, and it's coincidence that guy happens to be, either they saw this crash happen, or depending on how long they've been traveling down this river. But yeah, so they come across this village, which is, the stones become the MacGuffin of this movie, where they are basically suffering. They have no water. They have a drought. Their children have been kidnapped by, as we learned, the Thuggee cult, and they task Indiana Jones, which I once again I'm surprised people in this day and age don't go, hey, that's white savior nonsense and blah 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 because he's white, he's gonna save all the brown people and blah 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 because you know how this day and age works when it comes to movies that came out in 1984 and I just that's the kind of stuff that makes me laugh is like you have to look at this movie from a 1984 standpoint and compare it to today when it's a little bit different. But I mean, how do you feel about them tasking this man that they've just met who is literally trying to go back to Delhi to go back to his home country of the United States of America to recover kids? I don't know if it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you were talking about how a lot of stuff doesn't make any sense in this movie. Is this one of those sequences where you go, okay, so they're going to send a he's not in the best of shape. I mean, Indiana Jones has never been like the best of shape when it comes to an action hero, someone like John McClane. But then they're going to send a woman who is literally scared of her own shadow and a young kid to basically take down a massive cult, go to Bangkok Palace, which is supposedly Indiana Jones of course knows all this because it's Indiana Jones, but like, does that bother you? I mean, like it's suspension of disbelief, I guess. I don't know, tell me, help me figure this out.
I think it was a means to an end. It was just a way to get him to this place, to this palace that had this underground thing going on. It's not the best. It is like one of the weaker parts of the movie. It is when the movie slows down and nothing's really happening and they kind of just gotta I think that they tried to like they throw this whole ho-hum thing in there as to like, oh no, Shiva or whatever brought you to us, or I can't remember who they said, some goddess brought you to us to retrieve the stone, because since the stone's been gone now all these terrible things are happening in our village, kids going and all that. And I think and it is really just like thrown out there, it happens real quick. I think that that's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because like it's a bad thing because it does feel just kind of like, hey, throw this in there and give him just a reason to go over there. And it's very clear that's what it is. It's a good thing though, because there's not much more you can do with that whole idea to make it super compelling without really pumping the brakes on the movie, which the scene already does that. But you have had nonstop action up to this point for like, I don't know, probably 15, 20 minutes. It starts out just like bang, 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 bang. And it has not stopped since it started. So this is the first breather you have in the movie. So I get having a moment to like, gather your thoughts. But it does screech to a fucking halt. Like the whole mountain thing happens, they fall down, and then it's like, stop. And you get this, and then it jumps back into it after that. I think that they tried to add, not say they add the kid aspect into it, but they had the kid come who's like all dehydrated and or beaten up.
Well, as another level of what? How far did this kid travel?
Right. And they throw that in there to kind of make you sympathize a bit more with the cause. But I don't think it was, I think that it's so quick, and so they push the story along so fast to get you past that part to the more exciting parts again, because that's what you're here to see, that it loses a little something. Yeah, sure, it happens, but you don't really, it doesn't dwell on that very long for you to really get like a full sense of all of it and like feel something for the situation that's going on. Because as soon as you recognize, okay, they're taking kids and they're doing something bad to them, and we never like to see kids in peril like that, it's already like they're taking off again and they're on to the comedy and the excitement and adventure. Like I said, I think that that's a good and a bad from a story perspective. In that moment, it's bad because it doesn't spend enough time to build that part of it up. But when it comes to the rest of the story, it doesn't really matter, because it is just kind of a way for them to get him to this place.
That's true.
It's kind of superficial. It's just to, have him go there. I mean, technically they could have cut all that out and had him land like near the palace and him going there. I mean, he wouldn't have had
I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if the life raft just landed on top of Bangkok Palace? They're just like floating on top of
landed the palace. And they really could. They could have landed there or something like that near the palace and been picked up by the palace guards or people or something. And more or less, they have to make a few tweaks, but more or less the same story take place and him discover these things and still return them to their village in the end. I mean, because quite honestly, it's not like I felt any type of connection with this village or anything. It was really just a slower part of the movie. Sure, it explains, oh, the stones or something. The whole thing with the stones could have happened anyway. They could have had like
Yeah.
that little character who's in the jail with him, the little kid who's ADR like all the kids in this movie. He could have just explained, oh, the magic stones, they took them from. He could have like in a few lines given all the exposition that happened in that moment that he gets picked up by that village, and you would have had all the same information, and it wouldn't have really slowed the movie down nearly as much because you got some slow parts with like the dinner and all that. So quite honestly, they could have
Yeah.
cut all that out because it doesn't really add much. I think they were trying to add the whole, because you got the part like after they discover the kid, that's what makes him decide, yeah, I'm going to take this on and go help these people out. Once
Right.
again, just, and maybe you lose that, moral choice he made, but it's once again, it just happens so quick. It doesn't really add anything. They could have just ended up at the palace and discovered, you know, the secret passage, and him being being Indiana Jones, he's interested, so he goes on from there and discovered those things as they go, and it wouldn't have changed shit.
Yeah, it's mostly just like an exposition sequence, to be fairly honest. It's to give you enough information to know you need to go to this location, you need to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And that's all the purpose serves. Yes, it's important to find the stones, but it's like once they get to Bangkok Palace, which we have the whole sequence with the elephant, like the jokey stuff to kind of lighthearted the mood before it gets really serious, with the playing of poker and the snakes and stuff like that. It really is just a way for us to get to the next set piece that kind of inspired, because you never really hear from these people again until the very end of the movie. Indy's there to find the stones, but he might use them for profit or whatever. It just that's all it's serving a purpose to, and it's not like it's the worst thing. I've seen a lot worse
Oh,
exposition
sure. Yeah.
sequences, but it feels so, like you said, grinding to a halt. You're just like, here's my watch, I'm gonna stare at it till, oh, they're finally eating monkey brains. It's just like, yeah, I just don't care at that point, and I think that's his
It is the
main
slowest part
problem.
of the movie.
Yeah,
It is the
yeah, yeah.
absolute
It's
slowest
like,
part of the movie. I mean, like you said, I don't. It has purpose. I just think that
yeah,
it could have been repurposed differently if they wanted to keep the movie clipping along. Not that the movie's particularly long; it's right under 2 hours. But I
yeah.
mean, even so, the overall length of the movie doesn't matter if it slows things to a halt that much. Which slowing things down is fine. Slowing to a fucking screeching halt. This is the part where you go get more popcorn, use the bathroom, things like that. If you can't pause the movie, this is where you go do it because you're not really going to miss much.
And that's what everybody that's why Raiders of the Lost Ark does it much better, because the exposition sequences are not very long. For instance, Denholm Elliott does the whole Ark of the Covenant speech at the beginning. Then you have Salah, who does it a little bit differently near the middle of the movie, but it never settles down and is constantly moving. I mean, it settles down a little bit, but it doesn't do it to the extent here.
Yeah.
But once you get to Bangkok Palace, you're introduced to the prince, the young prince, the his kind of the
I am the
Maharaja.
prince.
The kid who's not, his balls haven't dropped yet. Who's the Maharaja. You're introduced to the guy from The Shining, who plays like the commander of the British Army or whatever. That some reason they're in India. I don't know why they're in India, but apparently the
Well,
British are.
that's accurate.
Oh,
The
is it?
British, yeah, the British should colonized India at that point.
Oh,
During that
okay.
time, that is accurate. They were there with
Uh,
their military and everything. I mean, I don't know how long they were there, but that's very accurate.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean,
I guess
I'm not
that's,
necessarily
yeah.
exactly how this movie portrays it, but they were over there
No.
colonizing India and stuff like that.
Oh, gotcha. Shatar Lai is the prime minister he's basically the Maharaja's like second command person.
Mhm.
And basically this is where we're kind of everything happens from here on out. We start to kind of uncover that there's something oddly weird going on. There's the discussion during the party about the thuggy cult and stuff like that, and like they're trying to play off, oh, there's no thuggy cult, stuff that didn't happen. And this is like the first sequence where I think human beings started going, is Spielberg on crack right now? Is George Lucas just like, is he in the corner going, smoke my crack, like smoke my crack. Like I don't know what's going on here because it's a well done. Like it might be one of the most effectively well done sequences in like the franchise.
Oh yeah.
But my God, what is going on here?
This whole thing it plays two parts. It is an exposition dump to a degree, to like, well, not to a degree, it is talking about the Thuggy cult, talking about how they're not
Yeah.
around anymore, and how this, setting up all that stuff. But quite honestly, that plays second fiddle to what the visual escapades going on here. Because when I was a kid and up until, adulthood, all I remembered about this scene, all the dialogue they were having and all that was really just like superfluous. It's just superfluous. It just wasn't. I didn't remember. I didn't really think of any of that. I thought about the little snake, or the snake with the little snakes in it, the monkey brains, the scarabs they were eating, all that stuff. That whole gag about everything they brought to the table for this lady. She was like, and all that. And let me see your hat and all that. That is what the whole scene was. And I think that was really well done, because they're able to say, okay, we're giving this exposition that we feel like you need about this cult and all that. How much you need it in that moment is, that's debatable, but we're giving you this exposition, but we're also giving you at the same time, we're still entertaining you and having this gag go on that is very well remembered. One of the most memorable scenes when you that comes to my mind, at least, is the whole monkey brains and all the eating, that whole thing. So it keeps it snappy, it keeps it entertaining while they're still dumping this stuff on you. Now, I mean, I think it would have probably been a bit more effective if somehow some of that stuff stuck with you more, but the information doesn't really, or for me, before I was watching it with a critical eye and had seen the movie 1,000 times, that stuff just really didn't mean much to me. But it is things, I will admit, that the rest of the movie you pick up as you go. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I never, even though as a kid and younger, maybe I didn't retain that information, I never felt like I was missing anything. When it got to where it goes down in the Temple of Doom, I was never like, what's going, why? I always understood. I understood what was going on.
Yeah, like you said, you have two parts going on here. You have the whole gag joke that's going on with Willie and Short Round, and I do like the fact that Indiana Jones is so in his own universe, just talking about the Thuggy call and the history of what's going on, that he's like completely oblivious to what's going on with Willie and Short Round until later on, where he brings the apples and stuff like that. But I feel like it's an interesting kind of exposition dump that doesn't feel like it's slowing down the movie. I think the fact that you have that other portion really helps offset what could be a very boring sequence. And when everything is said and done, it literally is setting up the what the next portion of this movie is going to be, which is the quest down to the the Thuggy cult Doom place and stuff like that. And I like I said, that whole sequence I think is perfectly well represented what Spielberg
I wouldn't be surprised if in the original script that whole exposition that happens there took place in a different spot. If it was just people in a room speaking and being introduced and stuff like that. I mean, maybe not. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it was. And then they said, hey, we need to spice this up a little bit. Let's have this going on in the background. Is actually the part that just doesn't matter, is the whole food eating, but that is what keeps you entertained while you're learning this information. So it is very well done.
Yeah, it's I mean, after you get all that stuff and all that exposition, it leads into just kind of the transition point where Indy and Willie kind of have their thing. Then, of course, Indiana Jones has to be almost murdered by some cult leader who is actually hidden pretty well. I think it's actually a well done scene where he goes to his room and the kind of the cult leader, the Thuggy, comes out of nowhere. It's kind of looks like he's part of the painting. I think it was, if I remember right.
But kind of like the wall dressing or something like that. Yeah, he just kind of comes out of the wall. He doesn't come out of the wall, but I don't think so. He's standing there, but he blends in.
And I kind of love it because it's just like, it's a cool little action sequence that plays out. Willie thinks that she's being ignored by Indy for sex, and turns out Indiana Jones is just being murdered by a cult leader. And it leads into what I think is the turning point for this movie, where it ramps up, where he touches the statue's boobs, which actually makes me laugh because she gets so upset by that. He's like, he's searching
right
around
here.
he feels it. She's like, I have my boobs are right here, guy. And it's just like,
funny thing is,
it, opens it.
He does that. She says that, and she's like, here I am. And then like he grabs the boobs of the statue and she's specifically to her, she goes, I'm right here. There's a kid in the room with him too. Short rounds are right there. I'm like, lady, you have like no shame.
She is from Hollywood. Hollywood has no shame,
Yeah.
I'm telling you. No, but the whole sequence from here on out, you probably agree, is where this movie really kind of picks up. It becomes kind of a different movie in a lot of sense. It becomes
Oh, it
all
doesn't slow down
about,
again.
yeah, it's like at this point is when like the was it the all the coke and drugs that they used probably went into effect, like it went into hyperdrive or
Crazy.
whatever. This is when
You want to
Lucas
get
was like,
nuts? Let's get
light
nuts.
speed. But a lot of the stuff that's memorable is like when I think it's pretty clever that Willie stays behind, because if you think about it, if Willie had gone with them, they'd all be dead. So Willie's actually like the
Yeah.
savior of Indiana Jones at this point, because they travel down. If you don't like bugs, the other great thing is like your worst fears. Most people's worst fears are in these movies, whether it be
That
bugs,
fortune cookie.
snakes, rats. Yeah, fortune cookie. And we find out it's a big like praying mantis type creature, but they step on a bunch of bugs and there's bugs all over the place, and it's just like the worst thing you can imagine. And then they walk into the room, and Short Round, of course, is the character that steps on the device that causes all the issues to start with Willie having to save him. But he's like, I touch nothing. I do what you say, Dr. Jones.
That's what you
He's
tell
like,
me. I do exactly what you say.
yeah, he's like, go stand next to the wall, and he stands next to the wall and starts the was it the crusher machine. It's similar to something like A New Hope with the compactor room, where
That great
they
music.
need
That music
what's
that
that?
starts.
Oh yeah,
The
that's what I was
music
going to talk
starts up.
about. I think this movie has the best score of all the Indiana Jones movies. I think it's actually the most unique of all the series, and I think it's the most fun,
It plays
because
with
it
what's
literally
going
is.
on screen better than a lot of movies, for damn sure.
Yeah,
Like that music is like the music of the machine that's trying the
right.
death machine that they're in. I love how like when they cut it off, it subsides, and then like when it immediately comes back on, the music picks up with it too, right there. It just and they're like, oh shit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Comparing this to the compactor scene, it really feels like Harrison Ford should not play characters in movies, because he's going to be crushed to death at some point. But the funny part is, the most insignificant character, really, to be fair, Willie's one of the most insignificant characters in the movie, because she really doesn't do much after this except be the woman that almost gets sacrificed,
Damsel in
and
distress.
she has to be the one that saves him. And it's actually quite genius kind of writing, where she stands behind, she's yelling, they can hear her and she can hear them, and she's yelling at them and stuff like that. And they're like, get the hell over here and save us. And she's like freaking out. She's like, I'll get there when I get there. And they're like, we are going to die if you don't put your hand into the bug infested door handle or whatever. And I don't know,
Not this
I love
one.
that.
Your other right. Your other right.
But
It does a really good
that's
job of
yeah.
giving everybody their moment and giving them all. You could look at all of it and say, if you took any of these characters out, even though like hers, she's just kind of almost a pointless character, but if you took her out, they would have died at that point. If you took
Yeah.
Short Round out, he would have died, later on in the movie and probably earlier. Everybody has their moment to add some type of purpose to the story.
Right. And I don't mean for her to say her character is just useless. I think that as the movie
She's kind of
moves
useless.
along, what's that?
She's
I
kind of useless.
mean, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
instance, Short Round, he actually helped save the kids. He helped save Indy. Like, his purpose is to be Indy's sidekick, and he actually does. He's able to break out of the chains with that rusty pickaxe later on, which is pretty funny. And I don't know. I always felt that Willie Scott, maybe at some point, Kate Capshaw's character, just kind of was lost in the weeds of all these interesting, fascinating villains. And we haven't even gotten to the actual main villain. We're like 45 minutes in this movie, or like halfway through this movie, before we get into the actual main villain of this whole entire like movie. And after they're saved, we go down and we see probably my favorite sequence, which is what the Thuggee cult is. We haven't learned exactly like what the policies and procedures of the Thuggee cult, but basically they're sacrificing a guy that looks like Mike White. And if you know Mike White, he was the friend of Jack Black in School of Rock. So I know it's not Mike White. I know it's another actor or whatever, but he looks like him.
I got I
Yeah, yeah. And I'll put a picture up just to show you kind of as a comparison. But
So I looked up the Thuggy because I'd heard of him through history and like historical things and all that, but I was just curious, like when they're around. I looked it up, and it's funny because like under the synopsis of them shows when they're founded, their name, how their name came from, and it is actually where in our language the word thug, that's where it comes from, because they were more or less thugs. But it says activities, murder and robbery.
hey, murder, robbery, and slavery, and pulling out hearts of people.
Yeah,
the hearts of men.
But anyway, murder.
Nah, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, like this is a pretty well-known sequence where we're introduced to a man named Mola Ram, who's played by Amrish Puri, who ended up becoming probably one of the most well-known actors in India for the Bollywood scene, playing bad guys. Apparently, this movie made him like shave his head because he thought it was a good look for him. But he was also apparently a very nice guy, which is I love the bad guys, like people like Javier Bardem and No Country for Old Men, and this character where they play such a great bad guy, but they're actually pretty nice people in real life when it comes to the nature of who they are. It just shows you how good people can be as actors. But this whole sequence is you can also elaborate on this too. I think it's great just on the simple fact that it's dark, it's disturbing, but it feels like an Indiana Jones sequence. The guy, the visual effects of the guy getting his heart pulled out, as stop motion as it looks, is really well done. The fact that
I was wondering that too when he
it
does
feels like a stop motion effect, but I thought it was pretty well done.
When no, I'm saying it is well done, but when he reaches in there and grabs his heart, he like because I know what scene you're talking about when he pushes through to his chest.
Yeah,
into his chest, and then it cuts away and cuts back. But is that stop? Because it did have like a jittery look to it or something, but it's clearly a prosthetic. Obviously, it's a prosthetic.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a real hand. It looks like. Why would they have needed to do stop motion? And for just a moment in the beginning, it does kind of have that jittery stop motion look, but then it seems normal. I was wondering, is it stop motion or did they do it at a different speed and then sped it up or cut some frames out or something? That could be. Because it does have a weird look to it, but I do not see why they would have ever done that stop motion.
Right, and you see that you see that Raiders Lost Ark, especially during the famous melting face sequence.
Well, that makes sense.
It almost feels like it almost feels like it almost like you said, it could be a sped up of the camera, or where they want to have like it's more effective that way, and they just have found a better way to do it like CGI and stuff like that now. But I think it's effective because they're able to disguise the prop, which you can tell it's a prop. It's not some guy they can go up to his chest and then they can do it like ripping into the heart and stuff like that as they cut away. But it's like when the guy catches on fire, when they take him down to the pit of fire, like there's a cut there that is so geniusly done where you can see the guy before he catches on fire. There's like a small cut that goes to the dummy that catches on fire, and is really well masked. And I think that's the same thing here. I think that's why it's so effective, because even though it is a little weird for today's standards, I think back in the day, we talk about this in the Fifth Dimension, there are like effects that are disturbing, that are clearly not great by today's standards, but are really effective by back in the day. And
I think if they'd done this scene in CGI, like if they remade this movie and did it more or less shot for shot with CGI, I don't think it would have the same impact. Because even though there's little things here or there that are a little off, it's so well done, and I'll always go back. It's real. It's a real thing. It's a tangible thing right there to touch. You can't touch it, but it's a real life. It exists. Like it's a tangible object that always gives it more weight. It just seems better. Go back to the shark and Jaws. People like to point out how like you can see like on his jaws, you can see the thing. He doesn't look perfect. I mean, it's not like there's CGI looking sharks or made sharks that look more anatomically correct or more realistic, but in your head it doesn't look more realistic because that's fake, that exists on a computer and only on a computer. But when it comes to something that you can see that you know someone could reach out and touch, it is always going to be more impactful, in my opinion. I mean, unless
Well, I
it's
mean,
made out of paper mache and looks like ass, but as long as they spend a decent amount of money on building these things and making something that looks fairly close to what it's emulating, I think that practical effects will always look better.
right. And I mean, you can look at like Last Crusade with the last sequence when um Julian Glover, or it's not Julian Glover. Yeah, Julian Glover like disintegrates in front of you. If it's the same thing, it's like you can tell it's an effect, but it's much more visceral and much more disturbing to watch, just on the simple fact that like it feels like it's there. It doesn't feel like, when Kate Blanchett dies in Crystal Skull, it feels like a CGI character being disintegrated by aliens. And yeah, it's pretty good here. Like I said, you see the guy catch on fire, and the Kali Ma Shakti Day, and Mola Ram, whatever he says, and all the men who are under like some kind of spell, as we learn later on. And it's great stuff because it's effective and it works and is disturbing. But like you can look back at any of the 50 serials and stuff like that. This is the kind of stuff they dealt with, maybe not on this kind of level of visceral, but the stuff they were dealing with was very dark and disturbing anyways, because just the nature of what they're doing.
It's all really well. I mean, that whole scene, I agree. I think it's just extremely well done, and no amount of CGI would make it look. I mean,
you wouldn't want like walkie talkies in there somewhere, or
no, yeah,
smiling.
He says he regrets that now, by the way. I don't know.
Oh yeah, because he knows it was stupid.
Because I think after seeing how people are going back and deleting things in movies and canceling movies from the past, he's now come around and said, by the way, those of you watching, talking about how in E.T. Spielberg went back and took guns out of the agent's hands and put walkie-talkies because he felt like it was I don't know, whatever, people with guns chasing after kids he thought was not good. But then, like, that was years ago, and now on the re-release of that, now he says he regrets that because he says that we shouldn't be messing with cinema and history like that, because that was what was going on at the time, and that is what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just how it was then.
Yeah, it's like, the whole Star Wars thing. It's, I know George Lucas is always ahead of the times when it comes to technology, and I understand why he did it the way he did, because the technology, it's like James Cameron, if he were to go back and like redo some of the visual work on like T2 or Abyss.
They did.
Like he understood. What's that?
He did.
Did he?
He went back and touched up T2 for the Blu-ray release or something like that, or the re-release. It was subtle. It was kind of like how Peter Jackson went back and did work on the Lord of the Rings for the 4K release. He didn't really change anything. They more or less upped the resolution on some of the effects so they wouldn't look so bad. Because when you took this movie that was shot on film in really the late 90s, even though it looks great there and it looks great then, it still looks good when you boost it up to 4K resolution. It's like, oh, I see some of the cracks now, because it wasn't meant to be seen that way. So he went back and really effectively prettied up the effects, so when you watch it as the viewer, you don't see a difference. They have been up-resed and changed and done better, but you don't see a difference, and that's really good, because typically you would watch it and you'd see, oh, this doesn't look as good as I remember it. Now it still looks as good as you remember it.
Well, I guess
that's what they did with T2.
I guess I should rephrase that now that you've said that. I think what I meant, what I was trying to say, was the idea of what George Lucas was doing. Let's say you went back and you redid and like 2001 or something like that. You added all this stupid effect stuff and all these like changes to the story, and it doesn't work. And maybe doing some color grading and fixing some color grading like they did with the Matrix and stuff like that. That's fine, because it allows you to kind of accentuate the movie. But when you look at like something like A New Hope, and you have Greedo shooting Han first, or you have that Jabba the Hutt sequence, it feels like you're just kind of bored. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, he just took it too far. At some point, you gotta cut it off and say, okay, it's done. And I mean, I didn't have a problem with him going back and remastering those movies and even adding a couple little things here or there. But it was like, you should have stopped here, but you went all the way over here.
Right.
There was nobody there to be like, George, stop. Just let it go.
Yeah, that's what they should have said during the prequels. George. Yeah. There is a thing
Stand
called
down.
practicality here. Batten down the hatches, George. That's the first part. We're introduced to Mola Ram. We're introduced to this Dougie call. Indy goes down to retrieve the stones. He gets he's doing there to but he gets kind of sidetracked by the sounds that he's hearing, which I don't know if it's the kids or if it's the thuggies that know he's there. I'm pretty sure they know he's there because something, anyways, because they take Willie and of course Short Round hostage. They like kidnap or take him to prison or whatever jail, whatever jail they have. And then Indy, of course, is flogged and made to drink the blood. And this is where we get this pretty much the second story arc, which is the kids, which we learn that there is a child slave system going on down in the Stuggy cult era. And I mean, what do you think about that? Does that feel right in an Indiana Jones movie, or do you think it's a way for Steven Spielberg and George Lucas to commentate on the child slavery and the world that was going on at the time? It's really, to be fair, it's fine. It works for what it's worth, but it is a very weird situation of child slavery in an Indiana Jones movie. I don't know.
I think there's a lot of things going on there. First of all,
yeah, apparently,
I think that they were trying to commentate lightly on child slavery and stuff like that, especially in like India and we'll just run with India. Definitely in that time period or around that time period was a thing that happened. I mean, those were things. Were they being put to work in mines to search for magic stones? I'm not going there, but I'm just saying they were using children as labor to differing degrees. And I think it was a little bit of a commentary on that. I think that it was not to the point to where I'd call it a message. It was just them taking something from that time period and saying, well, this is a thing and we're in this area, so let's throw it in there. And it does, I think it was an attempt to get the audience invested in what's the bigger picture of what's going on here. Because like I said earlier, nobody likes to see kids in peril and child slaves, that can tug on anybody's heartstrings or get people on board with your cause and get you to dislike the bad guys even more. I just don't think that the movie, and I think it was a fine line, because I don't think the movie, it shows it, but it never really gives you time to marinate in it enough or really focuses on it quite enough for you to get like deeply invested in that, because the movie moves, once again, it's such a quick pace and is like from scene to scene to scene. By the time you have a chance to think about anything, they're on to something else and you're like, and that was one of the reasons the movie works. It's because there are so many inconsistencies, or at least out there things that would get you to thinking that's not quite right. But it moves at such a fast pace, you don't have time to think about that. But the bad thing is when you have something like this that they want you to focus on, like child slavery, you also don't have time to really put much thought into that either. It's there, but while you're watching the movie, it's so quick to move on to the next scene, you kind of move past that. But if they had focused on it too much, it may have become kind of preachy and a message at that point. And you definitely don't want messages like that shoved down your throat in your Indiana Jones adventure serial. So
yeah,
it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't mind it being there. I was fine with it. It didn't really make or break the movie based on where we are in the story at this point. One of my favorite parts, I was talking about ADR and stuff like that, and just the sounds of the movie. I haven't even commented on the Indiana Jones punch sounds that are throughout this movie that I love.
Right.
Those were in the Raiders too, but I love that. It's like every punch is like a superhero punch, and it has like his punches move at such a fast pace that they break the sound barrier and like it's like a whip. Love that. And the Wilhelm screams, there are so many in this movie, you could make it a drinking game, and some of them are subtle in the background. But when he gets fed the blood or whatever, you drink the blood, you don't come back. And they put him in this room. I don't know, and it's probably just me. I find this scene so funny when they got him in this room, and it's got like a real nice ambiance going on with candles and shit everywhere, and he's like laying in the ground. Harrison Ford's performance here of his transformation, and he's sitting there bolt up and he's doing this, and he starts doing his yell is almost as iconic as Arnold's. His pain yell. He's sitting there, he goes, like he does that.
You think Spielberg's like louder? He has a bullhorn. He's like louder, Harrison, louder.
And it's like this,
More
I don't know,
campy.
it's this like yell that only he does. And he's done it in a few movies, but it's especially in these, like when he's in pain, like getting whipped or whatever. He's like, I find it great. It's fantastic.
Uh,
He's got like
yeah,
nice
it is.
candlelight going on and doing his little good times.
I like how as Indiana Jones is being whipped, short round just like runs up to the guy and just starts going. He's like, "Stop him! Stop him!" It's
You
like
know, hey,
little
Dr.
kid being.
Jones.
And
Dude,
they just like knock the kid out of the way,
yeah,
and then that's of course when the dog comes out that the Mirage is pricking and stuff like that,
yeah.
set on fire, and I think it's I think it's great. I think it's funny as hell because it's such a serious moment, but it's just like the way he's way he's yelling and
Well, that's what the movie does really well too, is it will take these serious moments, but it never gets too serious. Because I think if the movie got too serious, it would be kind of like, you're
yeah. I mean,
what
these are based
Indiana
off
Jones
serials and stuff
is.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's supposed to be to always have a little bit of camp and a little bit of, over the top and just a slight bit of goof to it to where, I mean, it keeps it lighthearted. I mean, ripping hearts out lighthearted, but
right.
it always keeps that. The movie does a really good job of always keeping that thread going throughout it where, yeah, we're talking about some heavy stuff about child slavery and death of kids and ripping out hearts and all this stuff. But we're going to continue to have just enough camp, just enough lightheartedness in it to where it doesn't seem.
Well, I mean, you can even think about like the ripping out of the heart and the moving the guy down the lava pit, so like that. That's all campiness. That's all like. I mean, if you think about it, like it's a cult that sacrifices people to a god.
Very
And it
1930s
just
King Kong.
yeah, exactly. There's like magical stones, and it gets to the part where Indiana Jones is now turned or whatever, and Willie's brought out to be sacrificed, and of course her heart's not taken out. But it's the same thing. It's like the guy that was sacrificed earlier in the movie. She is literally like inches from the fire, and she never catches on fire once.
Yeah.
And then Short Round, of course, escapes from the child slavery area, and he like burns Indiana Jones and stuff like that. It's campiness. It's weird. It's stupid. It's funny,
Not
but
before
it's
Indiana
also
Jones bitch slaps Short Round with the sound
right.
effect of.
But I mean, that's every time somebody gets hit, it's like the overzealous punch. It's like that
Oh, yeah.
very like they hit a bag type of punch. It's great.
It's like a whole bunch of sound effects in one that they made this
Right.
Indiana Jones punch because it's throughout all of his movies. Like Raiders did it too, and so does I don't know about Crystal Skull, but I know that the first three movies they all have that punch. When people get in fights, it's all.
Well, I mean, yeah, actually, in the ant sequence fight, when Indy gets hit by the Russian guy, it's the same punch. Like it's the only punch they use. It's the same punch. They have a database where it's just like punch at Indy, punch at Indy. It's just a guy pressing a button every 5 seconds. I mean, at this point, I told Chris when we did the Raiders episode, I mentioned to him about from the point where the plane sequence happens in Raiders of the Lost Ark with the big tall buff burly guy to the end of the movie. It was only 30 minutes till the movie was over. It's the same thing here. From the point where Indy gets burned by a Short Round, it leads into like one of the best action sequences in the movie. There's only 30 minutes left in the movie. So from the point when they get to Pangok Palace to the end of the movie, it's like probably 50 minutes of the movie. That's it. It's an hour, so it takes an hour to get there, but you only have 30 minutes in the movie. You have to do all this action stuff, and it's the best part of the movie because there's never a time to breathe. It feels like they're hitting their stride. The thing that is funny though is you have all the kids and all the thuggy people. You have the big puss that is Marlon Ram just escaped through the porthole that he has, or this escape hole that he has while he's laughing, which is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're a big strong guy until you get overwhelmed. But on top of everything, there's a point where Indy starts fighting the big thuggy guy, the main, they always have the big burly guy in the movie.
Yeah.
And I guess I think it's funny that the Maharaja takes his time pricking with the doll with Indy, and then takes it out and allows Indy to fight back. like, you know, they almost get sucked into the roller thing. But it's funny because you would think the Maharaja at this point would just leave the pin in Indy, allow him to die, but he's like, no, I'm just going to take it out every once in a while, allow Indy to fight back. And you
If
know,
he
at one
left it
point
in him, we would only get one. Because
oh,
he
that's
does
why.
it then too. Stabs him in the
Right.
back. He's like, no! He gets punched around with it.
I like how John Williams' score accentuates that sound. It's like, you
Yeah.
know, but no, it's just funny because like the funny thing about Indiana Jones is even though he is trying to not die, he still tries to save the bad guy at the end. And the guy just
Yeah,
goes,
he grabs it
ah,
and he's
it's
like,
sucked
oh,
into the
shit.
rollers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that kind of shows that his character is not like he's not want to be he's not a cold-blooded killer, but he'll, you know, other people though, I mean, he'll just shoot him.
Right. Yeah, when he's just tired and sick, he's just like, yeah, whatever, die. I don't care. You tried to fight me. And then we learned the Maharaja has also been under a spell, and he's able to tell Short Round take the left route instead of the right route. But you know this movie can't end, so they have to take the right route. And let's talk about it. The mine chase sequence, which is all for the most part miniatures. It's great. It's the best sequence in the franchise.
Minecart sequence that forever inspired video game levels for generations to come. I'm pretty sure this was, I could be wrong, but I feel like this was the genesis of the minecart level in video games.
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't be surprised if the people behind Donkey Kong Country were just like, can we just steal the minecart sequence? Like it is an amazing sequence because it's well shot. The miniatures are well produced. It's exhilarating. There's no music whatsoever being played throughout the background.
Even
and
the
it's
blue
just
screen stuff, even though you can definitely, it stands out, but it's just really it's shot so well that you don't mind. You're cool with it.
Yeah, it's like multi-visceral, it's multi-layered. There's people on the top, there's people on the bottom. You're never like confused about where you are. Sometimes you feel like you're on a roller coaster. Sometimes, you know, you're stopping the brakes with your feet, and you know, sometimes you're, you know, putting wood in front of the which I think is a homage to like Buster Keaton, where he like throws a block in front of the guys and they just like flip over or something like that when they can't stop it. And I mean, it's a great sequence. It's, you know, one of the best in the series just for a simple fact that it's very simple, but you know, there's never a shot that never feels like out of place. And I mean,
and all the miniature shots, the ones with the water, you can, especially when they first dump the water out, you can tell more there, but later on going down the tunnel, it's much better mask. But all the miniature sequences, like I mentioned earlier, and we were talking about, like of the actual mine carts, I just didn't, my mind, I mean, I wasn't looking for it either, but that's a great effect right there where I didn't notice it as a kid that, oh, that's a miniature. There's other miniatures I've seen in movies that I was like, oh, that still looks good, but I could tell it was a miniature. I don't hold it against the movie. Just like, it is what it is. This one, when I heard, oh, these are miniatures, those are dolls in some parts, and like I see it, and then when you see it, you see it. But I was like, holy shit, I've been lied to my whole life. Like it's done so well that you just don't notice it. It looks fantastic, and the whole thing is shot so well, and everything just lines up perfect. But even when there is a slightly, I'm not gonna say shoddy special effect, but by today's standards, it stands out more. It doesn't matter because it's just, even that stuff's done so well that you're just on that ride and having a great time with it.
Yeah, and this is at the time where ILM is kind of in their infancy. When I mean, they were pretty well known, but you know, the level of detail and the level of like balls that they have on them to do these kind of things like on the fly, you know, how difficult New Hope was to make. And you know, it gets to a sequence where, like I said, it's played for last, but Indy stops the minecart with his feet. And he's just like, they actually, I figured they would just kind of like let him go on his way, but they actually play out the fact that, yeah, his feet are on fire. There's smoking. He needs water. And it's great because there's water coming towards him. He's like, nope, we're going to run away now. Yeah. And we're going to find a way out of this. But they land on the side of a cliff, which is pretty funny because there's like poles like coming out from the
all
like,
just barely missing him.
Yeah.
He's like, water, water, water. And then he sees the water. He goes, water, water.
But of course it leads to another well-known famous sequence, which is the bridge sequence. And this is like just pure Indiana Jones. This is pure, you know, when he tells Short Round to hold on as he's going to break the rope. the fact that Short Round's just like, hold on,
Hold
lady,
on, lady.
this guy's crazy.
We're about to go
This
on a
guy's
ride.
crazy. I love the shots of the alligators because it's not the same location. It's just they shot a bunch of alligators in the middle of the water
Oh yeah, for
somewhere,
sure.
and it's just basically an action sequence that needs to kill off Mola and Ram. It needs to kill off a bunch of the thuggy soldiers, and it's still exhilarating because they're hanging off the side of a roped bridge that is now collapsed, and
Well, seeing
Indy's
that bridge
crazy.
collapse, like nowadays, it would be some like multi-cut angle shot of like some CGI bridge with close-ups of the people
Yeah,
being like, ah, and like all kinds of stuff, but it wouldn't have that same ooh and ahs like when you see. I don't know if it was a miniature. It was a really big miniature. It looked like it was practically done. I don't think there were real people on it. I think those were probably mannequins or dolls or whatever.
yeah,
But the bridge cut when it breaks in half and like swings up against the mountain, that looked like a real. It was how big it was, I don't know, but it was a real thing. It just looks super like, holy shit, they just did that and they're swinging on it. They sell it so well about how they did it. It's just awesome. It would not, with today's effects, it just wouldn't have the same ooh and ah and oomph, even though they could do
right.
more with it.
Right. And I mean, like the whole idea of like the Indiana Jones doing the chant that causes the stones to like burst through the bag. The way
Yeah, can we talk about that?
Yeah, yeah.
These
Go ahead.
stones
Go right
have, I mean, they
ahead.
glowed one time earlier
Uh,
in the movie when they put them close to each other, these people holding them. And he just said, legend has it that the diamonds, when you put them close to each other, the diamonds inside glow when you put them close to each other. Okay, I still got questions there, but okay, we moved on. Whatever. Everything doesn't have to be explained. But then at the end, I guess the chant he does is what does it. So what?
Well, how does he know the chant? Like he just
Well, there's
happens to
that.
know the
Well, he does show that he's familiar somewhat with the situation. So maybe, I don't know. That seems like some information. Even if you're familiar with it, you really knew the exact chant, but whatever. He chants and then they burst into flames in his bag. I'm like, okay, we are just going to look past that whole situation with these stones, not even give us a throwaway something as to what's going on with them. Like they just burst into flames. And then the one guy what's his name? Bolaram grabs it, it burns his hand, and he goes, and Indiana Jones just grabs it because I guess it just turned off.
Yeah,
he grabs the stone.
It's the Shiva or whatever the main character is, like the main person that apparently these stones are the body of some deity that they respect. But yeah, apparently just like because Indiana Jones is a true individual, he was able to touch the stones without burning him. It's like the person that can put themselves hand in the fire because
maybe throw that out there in the story at some point.
I mean, you could, but
the movie just says,
you could.
This is another one of those moments where the movie does something, you're like, what? But then like so much is going on, you kind of move on with it. But it's like, what the fuck?
You're just like, I guess. I mean, later on, his father and him are gonna they're gonna destroy a plane with some birds in a umbrella. So
yeah, I mean, you had the face melt and stuff with the arc in the end, but I mean, they even said don't look. I don't know. They pseudo explained that, and I'm cool with that. Keep things somewhat vague, but give me something. He just suddenly, oh, by the way, I'm going to say this chant. They burst into flames, I guess, because of the chant. Burn this guy, but I can grab him. Give me 2 lines, 2 throwaway lines. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. It's cool. It's Indiana Jones. I don't need all the explanation in the world, but you just did something big. And I don't even know why. I rolled with it because after that, you had a guy skip down a mountain and alligators.
Right. Well, no, I mean, you're clearly missing the whole point of this movie. So in the temple, there was a deity who came down and says, "Are you a god?" Indiana Jones said yes, and he didn't die. He was able to live. And Mola Ram's like, "I'm not a god," and he's like, he fell down the side of a building and got eaten by a marshmallow man. And
I did like that. No, I mean, Balaram when he fell down the mountain. It's a cool shot of him. Like it's clearly blue screen, but he's like hitting the edge and bouncing off. I think that's pretty cool. But then, like at the end, because there's like ground down there, and you see the lake or whatever over here, or river. He like just inexplicitly just veers off to the left. His body is like going straight down, and he just goes, "Whoa!" Because we need him to land in the water.
It's like a basketball when you throw it off a high point. It just, you know, how it like it just like positions itself to kind of float to a different direction.
Yeah, but
It's
he's
just
like
like that.
bouncing off the side. I would if he hit the first one and bounced out some, I get it. But he's just bouncing
Uh.
straight down the whole time and then go, wee.
The wind picked him up. The wind picked him up. He's like,
Yeah, the wind picked
wee.
up. There's a
I mean,
breeze
clearly
going
these
through the
alligators have
woods.
magical powers. They have the force, so
Yeah,
they're just forcing him over
that's
with the
hey,
force.
the Star Wars and Indiana Jones universe are linked.
Exactly.
Which the club in the beginning of the movie,
Um,
by the way, was Club Obi-Wan. I don't.
yes, it was. I completely forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Hey, you know what? Simpatico, whatever you want to call.
And
Um,
C-3PO and R2-D2 do show up as Sandstone or something like that in the first movie.
oh yeah. Oh my
Well,
God, it was a long time ago.
on the
Twilight
sides of
Zone.
yeah, it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
But like one of the
I mean,
inscriptions, like on the where he goes, but before he runs from the boulder,
yeah, yeah. I
one of the
forgot about that.
inscriptions on the wall is those two standing there. Or
I
something.
mean, his name is Indiana Jones, and you know George Lucas's dog was named Indiana Jones, and he wrote Star Wars, and there were robots named C-3PO, and you know Obi-Wan went to a club and got
Linked universe,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Death
yeah.
sticks. You don't want
We solved the riddle of this movie, why the
that.
Indians the way it is. But no, this basically leads to the British Army takes down the Thuggee Cult, and they end up back in the village, and they're all celebrating. Short round, of course, you know, blue balls. Indiana Jones as he's trying to kiss and eventually have sex with Willie Scott, and he's like, look, I'm
Who
an
called the
elephant. I'm
army, by
gonna
the way?
blow water on you.
Because they show up and Willie is like, it's about time. They showed up in the nick of time, by the way.
Yeah,
How did
right.
they know to go there? Was it like the kid got out, the prince, and he went and told them? That was really quick.
Well, he did come up with them, so he does show up with them in the
So I guess
beginning
he was
or when
supposed
they
to
show
go
up.
get them. Maybe there's like a time lapse we didn't recognize or something.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole sequence that takes place that it's only take 10 minutes long. It's actually like a 3 week. They were in the mine cart for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It just was like the longest sequence ever for them.
Yeah, they show up just in time. But I would like to also say that the guys, the Thuggee Cult with the arrows, they are precursors to these stormtroopers because they can't hit shit. There's arrows.
I know they're shooting all those
going
arrows. It's just like
all around this guy. I mean, they're like in between his arms and his legs, not even a graze. They are the stormtroopers of the Indiana Jones universe.
I know, and like you said, as you mentioned earlier, Indiana Jones runs away from him, or he runs towards him, or something like that.
Yeah. They all got swords coming after him, very stormtrooper esque.
But this of course leads them back to the village, and the village is reunited with the kids, and it's all happy dory. And like I said, Indiana Jones is blue balled by a short round for trying to kiss Willie Scott, and everything's happy and life goes on until the next movie when they need to make more money because it's Paramount, and Paramount's
Indiana
greedy
Jones,
for money.
the quest for more money.
But yeah, I mean the movie did well for 1984. I mean it made 198 or 184 million dollars in the
Is that
States, which is
worldwide
probably like
or nation or just domestic?
I think that it made 330 million dollars worldwide, which is probably what $700-800 million today, if I remember right. Let me check. Where's the inflation calculator? Inflation.
It was the largest number of prints ever made for a single release at the time.
Was it really?
247 millimeter prints of the film were made, the largest number ever for a single release. I did not know that at the time.
Yeah, now it's like 10,000 digital prints.
Yeah, now they just send out a file.
Yeah, 33. I need one more zero. So 330 million in 1984 to 2020. It would have made it. That's almost $1 billion.
So that kind of lines.
I would say it was successful. It may not have been as successful as the first film, but it was. It's like Back to the Future. I think because it's a lesser sequel. I think people went once, maybe twice, and didn't go back on Raiders, and they went back multiple times. And that's how those movies made.
When I was younger in the 80s when this came out, I remember hearing the Eberts and all them, and I don't know what he said specifically about it, but critics were very critical of it, and they especially about Capshaw's character and screaming and all that. And I even remember my mom commenting on that, saying all this lady does is scream the whole damn time. But I remember everybody I knew, we all loved it. And we thought it was awesome. This was Indiana Jones. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark was cool, but this was my favorite, like for my childhood. Up until, I got older and I kind of viewed movies differently. It was absolutely my favorite. And then it became, at this point, I'd say out of the three, it's my third favorite. But there's
Yeah.
nostalgia about it that just, I have a great time with this movie. It's got holes galore and issues with it. It's a little sloppy in some parts, not necessarily the filmmaking, more the story department, but it is just super solidly made. Yeah, it's got that part where it screeches to a halt, but it's only that one part. I mean, it lasts a bit longer than I'd like, and we don't necessarily need all that, but man, the vast majority of this movie is just moving the whole time and just really fucking well made.
Well, I like this review from Ralph Novak of People. He complained the ads that say the film may be too intense for younger children are fraudulent. No parent should allow a young child to see this traumatizing movie. It would be a cinematic form of child abuse. Even Harrison Ford is required to slap and abuse Capshaw. There are no heroes connected with this film, only two villains. Their names are Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
Damn,
I'm like,
that's a bit much.
okay, yeah. I mean, to be fairly honest, yeah, you shouldn't be taking in essence, you shouldn't be taking a 4 or 5 year old to this movie. But it's similar to like Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that, the Volume 3 that just came out. You have to be cautious and you have to understand your children and not just blanket say, oh, this may be too intense for younger children. You have to, like, some children this may not be too intense for, some children it may be too intense for. It's like this statement of like, oh, because this movie is very violent, it has hearts being ripped out and people eating monkey brains, which I think is funny because it's actually jello. It's just like, you got to know your movies before going in. I mean, I know it's a different time and they're trusting the critics, but it's like they're going to tell you if there's violence in it. They're going to tell you, and you have to make that decision. Like, you as a father has to make that decision
Yeah,
whether you let your kids watch this movie or not, or watch a movie, or I mean,
I don't think the movies does it have
well, no,
violence?
I'm not
Yeah,
saying. I'm just saying, like, to say a review like that is a form of child abuse. No, it's not a film.
that's
It's a
stupid.
movie where violence happens. Violence happens. People act like you have to be hidden behind violence, and it's just like, the movie's a serial of the 1950s, based. It's based off a serial where things like this happen. Maybe not to this extent of violence, but it's just like, I don't know. Maybe I don't like this movie as much. Like you said, it's probably number 3 for me as well. But it's just like, I think at this point, if you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know what you're getting yourself into. So
Well, that and it's a lot of it is tone. I mean, violence in movies, a lot of it comes down to tone. Take something like a Nightmare on any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The third one, Dream Warriors, super over the top. The tone, it is a horror movie, and it is ridiculously violent. Or that whole era right there, the 80s. Well, they were all 80s, but the you got people turning into cockroaches and arms breaking in half and just blood everywhere, but the tone of the movie, while still a horror movie, is a bit over the top. So whilst there are parts it's like, and I'm not saying you take your kids to see that movie, but I'm using this
yeah,
to illustrate, it doesn't seem as violent as, say, something like, I don't know, Hostel, if you remember those movies. They don't
yeah.
even have as much violence as, say, a Friday the 13th movie, but man, they're called gore porn. They're seen
Mm.
as much more violent because they're more serious in tone. I mean, to a degree, but they're more serious, trying to be more visceral, and they're showing this less violence, but it is seen as more violent and more gruesome because it's done in a more realistic way. It's not heightened. It's not over the top. Friday the 13th too. All those slasher flicks like the Freddy and Jasons of the day, they didn't seem as violent, even though they technically, if you look at what's happening on screen, they are more violent. This one's kind of like that. It's not to those levels, yeah, but it has a very light tone for the most part. I mean, it's got some heavy things that it speaks about or speaks on, but the whole tone of the movie is very lighthearted, if you will. So when this violence happens, it doesn't seem as bad as something like if it was a more serious toned movie. And I think that does absolutely play into how the violence is perceived, for me at least. I mean, you could take this exact same violence that's in this movie and give it a very serious tone, and it would seem leagues more violent than this.
Yeah, I mean, to by today's standards, this movie's pretty tame. It just has
Yeah,
that
see
it
stuff
has
on
that
Walking
reputation.
Dead that's worse than this, and that's on TV.
Right, right. You can see stuff on, but I just think it has that stigma just because of like its time and what it represents and how it
And it
works
did
and
spearhead the whole PG-13 movement of earning a
yeah,
new rating. So it's obviously going to always have that kind of, this is the movie that, triggered the new rating system because it was too much for PG but
right.
clearly not enough for R.
Yeah. Can you imagine if they did like a grindhouse thing for this movie? It's like the movie that shocked the audience into PG-13, the one with the heart ripping and the monkey brains, the movie that comes from the mind of cocaine addled individuals comes Temple of Doom.
Indiana Jones.
Jesus.
What?
Right. Oh, shit. So, anyways, that is the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. Once again, it got a couple Oscar nominations for score, which I think this is the best of the Indiana Jones scores.
Great score.
The ones I've heard, it's bombastic. It feels original. Like there are stuff in Raiders which I think is really good. Like the original score, but there's stuff that mimics like Star Wars in that movie. There's a lot of Star Wars motifs that
Music's
are
much
in
more of a
Raiders.
character in this movie.
Yeah, and this one
Not
it's just like
counting the main theme, the dun, 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 that's in
yeah,
all the movies. That's like the needle drop of the movies. But like the rest of the theme, like we were talking about with the Spike Crusher scene, the dun, 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 the score in this movie just takes on. It's almost a character unto itself. It really adds
right.
to most of the scenes that it's in, more so than. I'm not saying the score's bad in the other movies. It is good, but it's much more predominant here.
Right. And that's what makes it work. That's why John Williams is as celebrated as he is. But once again, it made about $330 million back in the day, and that's a lot of that has to do with the offshoot of like Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff like that, and popularity. It's similar to like what happened with Empire Strikes Back, but I think it's safe to say that this movie is really highly underrated because it does have its problems, like you said, but I think it overall is an entertaining movie and I think it works. And once again, I think everybody involved just they know what they're doing. Spielberg creates just competent material, and there's no movies like that people create that are as effective and visceral as some of the stuff they create in the Indiana Jones series. So
I think he prioritizes entertainment over anything else because he understands that's what he's doing. He's an entertainer.
yeah,
He's telling a story and being entertained. Because you could have like all those plot holes and stuff we were talking, or story issues we were talking about earlier. You could go through and make everything make sense, at least within universe,
yeah,
and it could make it boring. And maybe he saw that and was like, "Don't worry about that. We're here to have fun and be entertained. Let's do that."
yeah.
That comes
We're here
first.
to have fun and chew bubblegum, and we're all out of bubblegum.
Yeah, he's always been really good at that. And that is,
Yeah.
if nothing else, on display more so here than anywhere else.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So with that said, I think that we've been talking for a long time. I think we've been talking more than the last episode. So, that's what we do. But
Right.
Jacob, yeah, no, yeah, that's what we both
Where do
do.
you,
That's
before we
why,
go, which I don't know
yeah.
if you can say because this is the second, and I know you're doing all four of the movies leading up to the new one.
No, say
Where
what you want. Yeah, go.
where do you rank this one with all the? I know we love rankings here, but where do you rank this one with the four that are currently available?
I
Can you
mean,
say that?
I did. Well, no, I did mention you haven't obviously heard the episode, but I did. We did one in the Raiders, but it would be Last Crusade, Raiders, this one, and whatever dirt and poop and whatever, and then of course Kingdom. No, I mean Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's not bad. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It just has its major problems and feels very sloppy, but it's not. It's not terrible.
I need to rewatch it. It's been a while. I remember
Yeah,
thinking
I
it's not
was
as bad as what everybody said at the time, but it
right.
definitely. I was like, it ain't great either, but it's not the worst thing ever. People make it sound like it's like a fucking,
Well,
like crime against nature.
there's a lot of revisionist history going on with that film, like the prequels, like I've said.
I was gonna say
It's
prequels, the
just
same thing, man. People fucking hated those movies.
and yet they actually have a lot of heart and originality put into it compared to
Well, I think that they saw that it could be worse. We found that out, and people went back and said, maybe it wasn't so bad.
hey, George Lucas wasn't that
Yeah.
bad. Maybe he was good. Anyways, with that said, Jacob, thank you once again. I know I talked to you quite a bit. You're on the course of Fifth Dimension, but you have a couple channels. You have those channels that you do stuff on. You have one video that did pretty well for one of those channels. And what is that content? Where is it at?
Well, there's my old channel, the channel I still somewhat have stuff on, Jacob Anders Reviews on YouTube. Check that one out. It's not dead, I wouldn't say that, but I haven't released anything on there in a while. But I still plan on putting some things on there. However, my focus has kind of switched over to my newer channel. It's not really new; it's been around for a while, but it's been dead. But recently, I released essentially a history of the Dreamcast or story of the Dreamcast video on there. That's a different style of video and content, and that one has really picked up recently, and I'm trying to focus on that channel a little bit right now, so definitely check that one out. I'll have more videos like that coming very soon, and that one's called Retro Jake XY. Check that out on YouTube as well, and I'm also on Twitter at Red Neville 2, which you can see me mainly share weird videos that I find on Twitter that other people have done and comment on other people's stuff. So
There you
that's
go.
where you find me.
Excellent. For myself, this video, of course, is part of this Journey to Dial of Destiny featurette going on right now on my channel. I also am doing the entire Mission Impossible series leading up to Dead Reckoning. I'm doing a lot of videos. I'm getting ready to do a Jurassic Park retrospective, which will be out very, very soon. I'm doing too much content. It's like killing me. No, it's not really killing me. I'm doing it on purpose. I do it to myself. I love it. It's good stuff. But anyways, all that stuff's on there. What's that?
That I wouldn't do it.
Nah,
you
I know
got
you
like
wouldn't.
a shit ton of stuff going on.
Yeah,
it stresses
honestly,
me
I went
out
from
thinking about all the stuff you have to do.
oh, trust me, like when I had to sit down and edit a video like this, it's like I'm doing that like.
You were telling me
But
about all
anyway,
that content, and it reminds me of the days I used to do. I used to do videos every single day, and oh my god,
oh yeah,
stress me out.
it's but of course Jacob is with co-host with me and Triv from Trivial Theater on the Fifth Dimension. We're getting ready to at this posting we did like Still Valley or whatever it's called, so look forward to that. But with that said, we'll see you for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with another special guest. And Jacob, thank you again, and we'll see you guys later. Peace out. Oh yeah, I gotta. You just keep
Hit the button.